There's a kind of belly fat that no one talks about because you can't see it. I once had a patient, let's call him Mark, who came in feeling frustrated. He was 52, walked every day, ate what he thought was healthy, and his arms and legs were actually pretty lean. But his belly just wouldn't budge. Maybe it's just age, he said with a tired smile. But when we ran a body scan, the results were shocking. Mark wasn't just carrying a few extra pounds. He had over 2,000 grams of visceral fat packed around his internal organs. That's the dangerous kind of fat that hides deep inside your belly, and it's linked to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, liver problems, and even dementia. And here's the worst part. Even if you're not overweight, you could still be carrying it. I've seen people with a normal BMI who had dangerously high levels of this hidden fat. That's why so many folks over 40 feel like their health is slipping, even when the scale doesn't move much. But here's the good news. Visceral fat is actually the easiest fat to lose once you know how to target it. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how. Not with crash diets or intense boot camp workouts, but with smart, simple changes that real people over 40 have used to shrink their waistlines, boost their energy, and take back control of their health. Because if you're over 40 and struggling with belly fat that won't go away, this isn't about discipline or willpower. It's about understanding what your body needs right now and what it's been trying to tell you all along. So let's start at the root. The belly fat you see isn't the one you should fear. Most people think belly fat is just about what you see in the mirror, that little pouch that won't go away no matter how many crunches you do. But the truth is, the fat you can grab with your hands, that's not the most dangerous kind. The real threat lies beneath the surface, hidden deep inside your belly. It's called visceral fat, and it's not just about looks, it's about your life. Visceral fat is the fat that wraps around your internal organs, your liver, pancreas, kidneys, even your heart. Unlike the fat just under your skin, this fat doesn't just sit there. It's biologically active. That means it pumps out inflammatory chemicals and hormones that disrupt your metabolism, raise your blood pressure, increase insulin resistance, and inflame your arteries. In plain terms, it quietly builds the conditions for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, liver damage, and even certain cancers. Some researchers even call it the ticking time bomb of fat. Let me give you a picture. I once had a patient named Linda, 59 years old. She didn't think she was overweight. Her arms were thin, her legs looked fine, but she carried all her weight in her midsection. She joked about her apple shape and figured it was just part of getting older. When we did a DEXA scan, we found she had nearly twice the recommended amount of visceral fat. Her cholesterol was borderline, her fasting glucose was creeping up, and she often complained about low energy. "But my weight hasn't changed in years," she said. That's exactly the problem. Visceral fat doesn't always show up on the scale. It hides, but it harms. Now here's the thing. If you're over 40 and your belly has gotten softer, rounder, or just a little more stubborn than it used to be, it might not be about eating too much. It could be about what's changing inside your body. Hormones, stress, sleep patterns, and even seemingly healthy food choices can all contribute to visceral fat buildup over time. But before you feel discouraged, here's what you need to know. You have more control over this fat than you think. Unlike subcutaneous fat, visceral fat responds quickly when you make the right changes. You won't see the difference right away, but you'll feel it. In your energy, your digestion, your sleep, your labs, and yes, eventually, in your waistband too. So if you've been struggling with that stubborn belly and wondering why nothing's working, don't blame yourself. You're not broken. You just need a new strategy that's built for where your body is today, not where it was 20 years ago. And it starts with understanding why your current diet might be fueling this hidden fat without you even realizing it. Why surgery can't reach visceral fat, but you can. If visceral fat is so dangerous, you might be thinking, why not just get rid of it with liposuction? That's a fair question. In fact, many people assume that if they remove belly fat surgically, they're solving the problem at its root. But here's the truth. No surgeon in the world can suck out visceral fat. And the reason why tells us something important about how our bodies really work. Liposuction only removes subcutaneous fat, the kind that sits just beneath your skin. That's the fat you can pinch, the kind most people focus on when they look at their waistline. Visceral fat, on the other hand, is tucked deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your organs like a tight inner tube. It's not accessible through cosmetic procedures, and even if it were, surgery wouldn't stop the real issue. What's causing your body to store fat in that area in the first place? Let me tell you about a patient of mine, Henry. He was 61, had lost about 25 pounds through dieting, but still had a firm, rounded belly. So he consulted a surgeon. The liposuction removed some of the surface fat, and his belt size dropped by an inch. But 3 months later, his blood pressure was still high, and his lab showed elevated markers of inflammation. Why? Because the visceral fat hadn't changed. It was never touched by the procedure. That's when he came back to me and said, "Doc, I look thinner, but I don't feel any healthier." That's the key. What you see in the mirror isn't always what's happening inside. But here's the good news. While a scalpel can't touch visceral fat, your lifestyle absolutely can. In fact, visceral fat is often the first to shrink when you start treating your body right, through movement, better food choices, and just a little more awareness of what's happening beneath the surface. That's because visceral fat is more metabolically active than other types of fat. It responds faster to changes in diet, exercise, and stress management. And there's something empowering about that, isn't there? It means you don't need expensive procedures or painful recovery times. You don't need to feel helpless or ashamed. What you need is a clear plan, and the belief that it's never too late to start. Because this isn't about vanity, it's about vitality. Now, if you're wondering what part of your diet might be quietly feeding that hidden belly fat, let's take a look at one of the most common culprits, and why it's not just about how much you eat, but what kind of fat you're eating that can make all the difference. The number one hidden food habit, fueling visceral fat growth. Most people trying to lose belly fat focus on cutting calories. And yes, eating too much does matter, but what you eat matters even more, especially when it comes to visceral fat. There's one hidden food habit I see over and over again in people over 40 that quietly fuels the growth of this dangerous fat. And the surprising part? It often comes from foods that people think are healthy. That hidden habit is eating too much saturated fat without even realizing it. Now, I'm not here to say that saturated fat is bad or that you need to eliminate it entirely. Your body actually needs some of it, but the average American diet, especially among people in midlife, is flooded with it, and it's quietly pushing visceral fat storage into overdrive. Let me explain with one of the most eye-opening studies I've ever shared with my patients. In 2014, researchers took a group of healthy adults and overfed them on purpose, an extra 750 calories a day, but they split them into two groups. One group got their extra calories from muffins made with saturated fat, like the kind in butter, fatty meats, and cream. And the other group got theirs from muffins made with polyunsaturated fats, like those found in fish, nuts, and seeds. After just 7 weeks, both groups had gained the same amount of weight, but here's the kicker. The group eating saturated fat gained double the amount of visceral fat. Meanwhile, the other group didn't just gain less fat, they actually gained more lean muscle. Same calories, different fats, completely different outcomes inside the body. That's what I mean by hidden, because it's not about how full your plate looks, it's about what kind of fat is on it. Take Dayton, my brother-in-law. He loved a good ribeye steak. Juicy, marbled, delicious. But when we scanned his meals, we found that just one of his dinners had nearly 50 grams of fat, and almost half of it was saturated. That doesn't include the breakfast sausage or creamy coffee he had that morning. Altogether, he was taking in well over 50 grams of saturated fat per day, almost double the recommended limit. And again, he wasn't overeating. He just wasn't aware of where the fat was coming from. But once he made a simple swap, ribeye twice a week instead of 5, switching to leaner cuts like sirloin, and adding in more fatty fish like salmon, his visceral fat started to drop within weeks. Not because he starved himself, but because he started feeding his body the right kind of fuel. This is the kind of shift that makes all the difference after 40, when your metabolism, hormones, and inflammation levels begin to change. You don't need to fear fat, but you do need to know which fats are helping you and which ones are silently working against you.
And while saturated fat may be a hidden driver, it's not the only one. There's another ingredient, something almost every American eats, every single day. That's even sneakier and just as harmful when it comes to visceral fat. Let's talk about sugar. Sugar, the silent builder of dangerous belly fat.
If saturated fat quietly fuels visceral fat, sugar turbocharges it. And not in the way most people think. Added sugar, especially the kind found in sweetened drinks, packaged snacks, and sauces, has a unique ability to drive fat storage deep inside the belly. It's not just about weight gain, it's about what sugar does to your hormones, particularly insulin. Fructose, one of the two sugars that make up table sugar, goes straight to your liver, where it gets converted into fat. And guess where a lot of that fat ends up? Around your organs. In one study, people who drank sugary drinks made with fructose, not glucose, just fructose, developed significantly more visceral fat in just 10 weeks. Their insulin resistance also worsened, meaning their bodies had a harder time handling carbs. Now, to be clear, fruit is not the enemy. Whole fruits contain fiber, water, and nutrients that blunt the impact of fructose. The real problem is added sugar, the kind in sweetened yogurts, ketchup, juices, granola, even so-called healthy cereals. Take bubble tea, for example. 1 cup can contain 40 to 50 grams of sugar, more than what's recommended for an entire day. Dayton used to have one after work almost daily. He thought it was better than soda. But when we swapped it out for an iced green tea with a splash of protein powder for sweetness, not only did his sugar intake drop dramatically, but he noticed fewer energy crashes, and his belly started to shrink. If you're over 40 and still having sugar throughout the day, often without realizing it, start looking at the labels. You don't need to cut it all, just cut it where it counts. And the best way to do that isn't through willpower, it's through replacement. And that brings us to your secret weapon.
Why protein is your best ally against hidden fat. When it comes to shrinking visceral fat, few nutrients are as powerful or as underused as protein. Not only does protein help preserve muscle mass as we age, but it also keeps us full longer and naturally reduces overall calorie intake without you even trying. That's because protein takes more energy to digest and slows the release of sugar into the bloodstream, which helps regulate insulin, one of the key hormones involved in visceral fat storage. I remember working with Tom, a 63-year-old former truck driver. He wasn't keen on giving up all his favorite foods, and to be honest, I didn't ask him to. We simply focused on one change: doubling his protein intake. Instead of toast and jam for breakfast, he had eggs and cottage cheese. Instead of chips for a snack, he grabbed beef jerky or a protein shake. 12 weeks later, without counting a single calorie, Tom had lost over 12 pounds. And the scan showed that most of it came from visceral fat. More energy, better sleep, and a noticeably smaller waistline. The best part? He didn't feel like he was dieting. He just felt nourished. So if you've been hungry, tired, and frustrated with your belly, don't start by cutting food. Start by adding protein. And now, let's explore how to exercise smarter, not harder, to make visceral fat respond even faster. How to exercise smarter, not harder, to target visceral fat. Here's the frustrating truth. You can't spot reduce belly fat. No matter how many crunches you do, they won't burn the fat sitting on top of your abs. But visceral fat is different. It's far more responsive to the right kind of movement, particularly cardio. In one of the largest studies on this topic, researchers found that moderate to high-intensity cardio and interval training were the most effective at shrinking visceral fat. Even without weight loss, these types of exercise led to significant reductions in belly fat wrapped around organs. That's because high-intensity movement triggers the release of fat-mobilizing hormones, especially catecholamines. These hormones are like a key, unlocking the fat stores buried deep inside your abdomen. But you don't need to kill yourself with workouts. A simple 20-minute session 2 to 3 times per week is enough. Warm up for 5 minutes, go hard for 30 seconds, not all out, just enough to make talking difficult.
Then recover for 90 seconds. Repeat 6 to 10 times. Walking on your rest days? That's gold. Even 8,000 steps a day can keep your progress moving. This approach is doable, realistic, and most importantly, sustainable, especially for people over 40, when recovery becomes just as important as effort. And now, you're ready for the full blueprint. What would a full day or week look like? Let me walk you through it.
The 30-day anti-visceral fat blueprint that Dayton followed. When Dayton committed to changing his belly, we didn't hand him a complicated plan. Just a focused blueprint built around 3 pillars. Smart food swaps, lean meats over fatty cuts, protein shakes instead of sugar-loaded coffee creamers, fruit over juice. Movement strategy, 3 short interval sessions per week, plus walking daily. Consistency over perfection. No guilt if he had pizza. Just balance it out. Here's what one of his days looked like. Breakfast: Greek yogurt with protein powder plus blueberries. Lunch: grilled chicken salad with olive oil and avocado. Snack: air-popped popcorn with protein powder caramel drizzle. Dinner: salmon with sweet potato and broccoli. Dessert: protein pudding. Calories: about 2,000. Sugar and saturated fat: cut in half. Protein: nearly doubled. And guess what? Within 10 weeks, his visceral fat dropped 50%. His waist shrank 3 inches. His doctor reduced his blood pressure medication, and Dayton felt better than he had in years. That's the power of small changes. Consistently apply. Final lesson. You can't see this fat, but you can feel the change. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this, it's this. You can't see visceral fat, but you can absolutely feel when it's changing. You'll feel it when you wake up with more energy instead of dragging through the morning. You'll feel it when your clothes fit better, even if the scale hasn't budged. You'll feel it when your digestion improves, your blood pressure drops, and you stop crashing mid-afternoon. These are the signs that your body is healing from the inside out. This kind of fat doesn't melt overnight. It didn't appear overnight either. It's the result of years, sometimes decades, of subtle shifts. More stress, less movement, a little more convenience food, a little less sleep. But the incredible thing is that visceral fat responds faster than most people expect, once you give your body the right conditions. Dayton didn't change everything. He just changed a few key things and stuck with them. And within weeks, his body responded. So will yours. Because this isn't about having six-pack abs or chasing perfection. It's about giving your body a better chance. It's about protecting your heart, your brain, your future. And it's about knowing that at any age, you still have the power to take control of your health. Now, if you're ready to go beyond just shrinking your waist and actually want to start seeing visible ab definition, there are 2 simple core exercises I recommend to almost every patient over 40. Not only are they safe and low impact, they're incredibly effective. Let's walk through those next. You're going to love how they feel and what they reveal. Thanks for watching. Remember, your health is your greatest asset. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll keep bringing you clear, science-backed information on obesity, weight control, and living your healthiest life, so you can take charge of your future, starting today.